Any other vote? Announce the results.
Ayes 96, noes 26.
The bill is passed.
Assembly 103, calendar number 6, Mr. Thiel, an act to amend the general business law.
An explanation is requested, Mr. Thiel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is an amendment to Chapter 579 of the laws of 2008, which outlawed the practice of zone pricing of gasoline in the state of New York. It was the first in the country to outlaw zone pricing. And zone pricing, in summary, with regard to gasoline, is setting the price solely based on geography without any reference at all to cost. In December 2011, the Attorney General issued this report on gasoline prices, and one of the things that the Attorney General pointed out was that there were a number of terms in the zone pricing law that were vague, which made it difficult for him to enforce. And as a matter of fact, in the 8 years that this law has been in effect, there hasn't been one action brought by the Attorney General because of the vagueness in some of the terms. The Attorney General recommended revisions to the bill, and it is those recommendations that came from the Attorney General that are the recommendations that ended up being this bill. The bill does the following. It defines zone pricing, and zone pricing is defined as the establishment of price differences based on geographical location of the retail outlet within the relevant geographic market without regard to posted terminal price and any additional costs where the effect is to injure competition. It also defines what additional costs are as all replacement and transportation costs and taxes incurred. It also defines what the relevant geographic market is, and the relevant geographic market is the geographic area which is supplied by the same terminal facility. Lastly, the legislation makes it clear that this law applies not just to wholesalers supplying independent retailers, but also to dealer-owned stations. The bill is supported by various gasoline retailer associations and service station owner groups in the state, including the Long Island Gasoline Retailers Association. The bill has passed in the Assembly 3 times in the last 4 years by overwhelming bipartisan margins, 135 to 13 last year. We have 19 sponsors, 11 majority, 8 minority, and we have majority sponsorship for this bill in the state Senate.
Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield for some questions?
Yes.
Mr. Thiel yields. Mr. Walter.
Fred, are any of these sections intentionally omitted? Just kidding.
I think the answer to that is no.
All right, thank you. Good. Well, we're better off than we were last week. Okay. So you mentioned it changes the definition of relevant geographic market to mean those served by the same terminal facility. My understanding that the same terminal facility could be within, stations could be within a mile of that terminal facility or 50 miles or more. Are those really the same market?
Well, I think the Attorney General, when he made the recommendation for this revision, needed something that was finite, that you could actually look at and determine what the relevant market is. And I think that they determined using the terminal was the best way to do that.
I'm thinking about, Long Island. I mean, I would imagine the market in the Hamptons is probably much different than the market in Riverhead, though, wouldn't you?
I think it would be.
Would that be within the same?
Well, as long as the differential in prices, as long as the differential in price is related to actual cost, transportation, that's fine. But to simply set a different price based solely on geography is not fine. So if it's related to, whether it's transportation, rent, other taxes, that's fine.
Certainly the folks in the Hamptons can afford to pay a higher price than maybe the folks in Riverhead.
Well, that may be the case, but that's what's wrong with the pricing structure, is that it shouldn't be based on geography. It should be based on the actual cost of the product.
What about supply and demand and the number of service stations within the region and other factors, labor costs, things like that? Shouldn't that all go into calculating what the price of a gallon of gas is going to cost?
Well, certainly labor costs should. Supply and demand, the fact of the matter is on the wholesale level, and what we're talking about here is pricing on the wholesale level that the retailers get, which is why the retailers support this bill, is that there aren't that many. And, whether or not there is really legitimate competition or they're able to set those prices is, as I think, part of the reason for this bill.
Well, part of the differential, though, is how the stations demand the gas. One of the things that determines the price of gas is what your contract is. So last year we talked about the difference between, DTW, dealer tank weight, versus spot market. And so if you want a guaranteed supply of gas, regardless of what the market and the demand is, you're going to pay a little bit higher cost than you are if you're at the will of the market and you don't necessarily guarantee your supply. But this doesn't take any of that into consideration, does it?
Well, I think if you can demonstrate that that's a legitimate cost of doing business, that you're getting you're paying a little extra to have that guaranteed supply, I think that would be, part of the issue. But if there's a cost that is based on a legitimate factor, such as the ability to have a guaranteed supply, I think that's the case. What this bill would address is that if you're dealing with one retailer in one part of the same market differently than another retailer in a different part of the market, and they're otherwise similarly situated, for instance, if they have a contract as opposed to being on the spot market. So I think that would be actually something you could take into account.
One of the things this bill also changes is it takes the ability of maybe it doesn't take the ability of the Attorney General to bring a cause of action, but it broadens that to have a private right of action. So other wholesalers can sue because there might be zone pricing going on.
That's correct. Under the original bill, the Attorney General could bring the action. This does give a right of action to a retailer or wholesaler who is injured by the differential in price. But I should point out that it does not allow them to collect any damages. It would only allow them to enjoin the practice.
Isn't that, aren't we inviting litigation, though, by doing that, really fouling up the market? The basis of having the power within the Attorney General is to avoid that type of behavior where, one competitor can sue another one in order to gain an advantage.
Well, certainly the Attorney General should have the authority, but I think, a competitor who is injured should at least have the right to be able to bring an action to stop that particular practice.
But he can also contact the Attorney General and
that would certainly be a cheaper way for him to do that.
And also, by tightening up the definitions, as you're doing here, supposedly we're giving the Attorney General more of a basis to bring an action. So really, to tighten up the definitions, give the Attorney General what he's looking for, and then also create another private right of action, it's kind of a double whammy there, isn't it?
I don't view it that way. I chair the Small Business Committee. It is the small businesses, the independent retailers that are being injured by this practice. This is giving them, they don't have all of that much leverage when they're dealing with the wholesalers. I see this more as leveling the playing field a little bit so that the local small business person, the local independent retailer, has a little bit more leverage as far as being able to get a fair price from the wholesaler.
Thank you, Mr. Thiel. On the bill?
On the bill, Mr. Walter.
In 2007, Mr. Speaker, there was a Quinnipiac University did a study conducted in Connecticut, and it showed that a ban on zone pricing would likely result in higher wholesale prices in most regions of the state and higher retail prices in some parts of the state. The Connecticut legislature wisely decided not to institute that zone pricing law because what they found was it's going to raise prices for everyone. If a wholesaler is getting a higher price in the Hamptons than he is in Riverhead, and he's going to have to make a decision on what price he's going to wholesale at. Well, he's not going to wholesale it at the lower price. He's going to raise those prices up to the higher price. And so what this will end up doing is costing consumers in the state of New York much more money over the long haul. And we already pay some of the highest gas prices in the country because we have some of the highest taxes in the country. And that has a lot more to do with the price of a gallon of gas than what we're doing at the wholesale level. So I would encourage my colleagues to vote against this bill. I think it will result in higher prices for consumers, and that it's not the right way to go for the citizens of the state of New York. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the bill. On the bill.
On the bill, Ms. Wozniak.
When I first took office, there was an ongoing debate in Western New York as to why our gas prices were falling more slowly than some of our local areas, such as Rochester. So we kept seeing about a 20-cent lag. So I looked into it, and with a lot of research, we determined that this bill was actually what we needed. There's one supplier that holds about a 30% share in our area, and they were able to really control that entire market. And this, the recommendation by the Attorney General's office and what this bill addresses, I believe absolutely is what we need. And what the Assemblyman, the sponsor of this bill, Assemblyman Thiel, had already mentioned about the local retailers being at a disadvantage, it's really true. The local retailers are beholden to what the suppliers are doing. So I just would like to commend the sponsor of the bill for bringing forth this legislation, and I would like to recommend everyone to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Read the last section.
This act shall take effect on the 30th day.
Clerk will record the vote. Mr. Thiel to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To explain my vote, I just wanted to make one point that came up in the debate, and that is that somehow this would allow wholesalers to charge even higher prices. If they had the ability under this bill to charge higher prices, I can assure you that they wouldn't be opposing it. And I think this is a consumer-friendly bill, and this is good for the small business, independent gasoline retailer. And we've had this debate a couple of years. I'm wondering if it was, instead of zone pricing, if we had made it man-to-man as opposed to zone, whether it would have been any different. But I know. Basketball season's over. I'm sorry.
Not quite. Tonight, Mr. Thiel, tonight. The ladies are going at it. Mr. Brindisi to explain his vote. Shh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To explain my vote, I also want to commend the Speaker, the sponsor of this bill. We have an issue right now happening in this state where, depending on where you reside, you pay different prices for gasoline. I can give you an example from my own region, the Utica-Rome region. We consistently pay 10 to 15 cents higher than our counterparts in other upstate regions, despite the fact that our gas is delivered from the same pipeline and the same terminal as those regions. So this is a consumer-friendly bill. This is something that's going to help set the standard across the state so gas suppliers charge a fairer price. It's something that's long overdue. We need to tighten these regulations and give the Attorney General more power to go after these unscrupulous gasoline suppliers. So I withdraw my vote, and I will vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Brindisi in the affirmative. Ms. Russell to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to add my name to the chorus of members here today to really show just how pervasive this issue is. It has certainly been brought to my attention by certain pockets of the district that I represent. It doesn't happen in some places, or maybe not as much, but certainly in the far northern part of my district in St. Lawrence County, there certainly appears to be great discrepancies in the price of gasoline. And so I commend the sponsor for bringing this forth, and for all of my colleagues that have shown the spotlight on really just how this reaches every corner of this state, and that it is an important issue that is past its time for us to address. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I vote in the affirmative.
Ms. Russell in the affirmative. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 104, noes 11.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could give the next two bills, I'd like to take up calendar number 55 on page 10 by Mr. Levine and calendar number 179 on page 19 by Mr. Ortiz.
Clerk will read.
Assembly 1193, calendar number 55, Mr. Levine, an act to amend the insurance law.
An explanation is requested, Mr. Levine.
Certainly. Amy? This bill, Tom, which is a very fine bill, because you're a co-sponsor, provides some due process protections for physicians when insurance companies or healthcare plans allege that the doctors have been overbilling. And what this bill does in terms of the exact protections for the physicians are these following items. The bill obviously amends the insurance law, and it requires that the health care plan must advise the physician, provide the physician with written notice that the insurance company is going to use extrapolation. Extrapolation is a type of estimation that the healthcare plans use to try to figure out a determination as to the amount they want back from the physicians. So the plans have to provide written notice that they're going to engage in extrapolation, and they have to apply a valid statistical method of extrapolation using something that I know we're all intimately familiar with, and that's called stratified random sampling methods, in order to assure that the evaluation is fair. The companies have to advise the doctor as to the particular type of methodology of extrapolation they're going to utilize, and they have to provide the doctor with 60 days to appeal the findings of any audit. And in the event there is an appeal, the provider, that's the doctor, can seek a review of the findings to be determined by a mutually agreed upon independent third-party auditor. And of course, the costs for any such appeal are borne equally shared equally between the physician and the health care plan.
Mr. McEvitt.
Sir, will the sponsor yield for just a few questions?
Will you yield? Mr. Levine yields.
Thank you for the explanation, just going step by step through the bill and what the requirements are. And actually, I only have questions regarding the last portion of it. Actually, on the first page, it's lines 20 through 25, when you talk about that in the event of the appeal of the audit, both the provider may seek a review by a mutually agreed upon independent third-party auditor. And my question is how do they come upon an agreement of the third-party auditor, and what if they are unable to reach such a consensus or such an agreement?
Good question. Thumb wrestling.
Okay.
That's what they're going to. That's what they're going to do. That's an interesting question that will be left up to the whoever is drafting the rules and regulations.
And just a curiosity question: do you have an idea on how much this additional review would cost? Obviously, in order to make it fair, you split the cost between the insurer and the healthcare provider. But if the cost is so great, I'm not quite sure where we're really giving them much of a benefit if it's a very cost-prohibitive analysis in the appeal.
Well, that's certainly going to be a consideration. I have no actual approximation of the expense involved in an appeal of an audit. I think the best we can hope to do, however, is to make sure that there are certain basic due process protections for the physicians. And that's what this bill attempts to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect immediately.
The clerk will record the vote. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 103, noes 10.
The bill is passed.
Assembly 4364A, Calendar 179, Mr. Ortiz, an act to amend the general municipal law and the executive law.
An explanation is requested, Mr. Ortiz.
Sure. Absolutely. The purpose of this bill is to ensure that all police officers in the state are capable of performing the life-saving technique of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, by requiring retraining of the technique every 2 years.
Ms. Corwin,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield?
will you yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you, Felix. I know we've discussed this bill in the past, and like I said, I think it's a wonderful idea and something certainly the community would benefit from, having police officers trained. The big concern, of course, is the cost. Hiring the trainers to come in on a biannual basis. Is there anything in the bill that would address the cost issue?
Well, according to our Ways and Means folks, they estimated that the police department provides CPR training to their new officers already, and many of them have training personnel in-house because of this reason. In the cities, paid firemen are all certified in CPR and can offer the refreshment to police at no cost to the city because they are sometimes in-house in the same facility.
Okay, great. So it sounds like there is an opportunity, because that was my next question. Could the American Red Cross offer some volunteers?
That is correct.
Sounds like they have that ability. Which begs the question then, why do we require the law? Because wouldn't they something they would do already?
Let me just refresh my colleagues why this bill is so important. The reason is that if we recall back in September 2010 in New York City, was a young lady at the age of 11 years old, Brianna Ojeda, who a police officer denied to provide CPR. As a result, that he was not trained accordingly through the academy. So that brought me to present this piece of legislation to light in the New York State Assembly. After fact of that, we also have seen all the cases where police officers has denied to provide CPR as a result of the lack of training. In New York City as well, we have the latest cases has to do with a police officer who shoot someone, and over the sun, the police officer was even afraid to perform CPR because he didn't know the how. And the police department had to fire the trainer of the person who provides the services in the academy. So this is what we're trying to do here is to really to mandate that every 2 years, this police officer, the law enforcement, will be able to be retrained on CPR the same way they get trained for firearms.
Sure, sure, and I understand, and it's so tragic about Brianna and what happened to her, and again, what happened with the police officer in the case in New York City. My understanding is that there was training that was given. However, there were people involved who were kind of cheating the system. They didn't actually go through with the trainings. Some of the trainings were done where they weren't hands-on trainings. They were there was things that were told to them, but they didn't actually have the opportunity to practice it hands-on. Does this bill deal with any of that? Because it sounds to me like what we're saying is, yes, you have to have the training, and it sounds like it's already happening, but it's not happening very well or very effectively, and perhaps we need to focus on making sure that when we do require this training, that it's done so that it actually teaches the police officers how to do it.
The bill demonstrates that they should require that they should demonstrate proficiency and efficiency as they providing this training. I do read the article in the New York Times, probably that you're referring to, that where police officer was cheating in the test as a result that they was told to perform CPR, but they was unable to do it because they was they somehow somewhere they got the answers of the test. So we are trying to prevent all these things from happening. We do know, and I know, firsthand that we have great law enforcement. It's always bad apples when you have 34,000 plus police officers in New York City, and I do believe that this probably will help our police officers and the academy, and specifically every single one of us, that in case we get involved in anything like this, that a police officer will be able to perform CPR.
Okay, thank you very much, Felix. On the bill, Mr. Speaker?
On the bill, Ms. Cohen.
Since the last time we took a vote on this bill, there have been some tragic incidents that happened, particularly in New York City. And I certainly agree with the sponsor in the sense that having this kind of training and having this skill is very, very important. My concern here is with this bill, it requires that it be given. It does require that they have to demonstrate satisfactory completion of the training. So I'm actually changing my mind on this vote, and I voted against it in the past. I think I'm going to support it now because I believe it's important that if we're going to require the training, that we make sure that they actually learn the skill. It doesn't change the fact that still is no funding being provided, and outside of New York City, of course, we're dealing with the added problem of a 2% property tax cap under which the police officers are operating. So as long as we can provide these trainings free of charge or at a very, very low cost to the municipalities, I think it's fine to require it. But we also absolutely want to make sure that they actually complete the training and that they demonstrate an ability to perform CPR. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Barron.
Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Barron.
The case was brought up. They're talking about the Akai Gurley case and Officer Peter Liang. I think we got to realize while they said he was trained and he was required to do that, he felt that he wasn't competent enough. So the demonstration, I think, is a good idea. But also, I don't know how we legislate a person's will to do the right thing, because I don't even think he didn't know how to do it. I think there was no will to do it. So we probably have to find some legislation that will say that they're required to do this, because in that particular case, the young lady who was with Akai Gurley, Melissa Butler, applied the CPR through the directions of the EMS over the phone. So if two officers who did have some training didn't feel adequately enough to do it, at least they could have gotten instructions over the phone and applied the CPR. So I think this bill is an important bill, and I think that the demonstration of competency in doing it will take away from the claim that they didn't know how to do CPR. And in this particular case, the officer, Peter Liang, didn't even come down right after he shot. He didn't even come down to check to see if Akai Gurley was hurt or in danger. He was just trying to save himself by looking for the spent shell and calling his police supervisor to see if he was in trouble for discharging his weapon, which we know wasn't an accident. He used force to discharge that. So I think this would take away from the excuse that I don't know how to do CPR, and will show that everyone demonstrated the ability to do that, and there should be no reason not to apply CPR in the case where it is needed. So I say aye on this bill. Yes, good bill.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect on the 60th day.
Clerk will record the vote. Music to my ears. This might be just one of those. We are in accord. Mr. Tatone to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will be brief, and I want to commend the sponsor of this bill. I think it's a great bill. You know, very often we have bills coming to the floor where we want to create new designation of peace officers, whether it be, you know, firefighters, volunteer firefighters, fire chiefs, this, that, ASPCA officers. And really, you know, when we create the peace officer status, we're saying, well, let's give them a gun legally. So for, you know, it's kind of disheartening that there are those who would vote to create new designation of peace officers to give a profession a gun, but they don't want to give peace officers the ability to perform CPR. So I think this is a really great bill, and I commend the sponsor. And Mr. Speaker, I'll be voting yes and would urge all my colleagues to do the same.
I think we'll take them up one at a time. It's okay. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 110, noes 8.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I understand we have housekeeping and resolutions to take up.
And you are correct, Mr. Morelli. On a motion by Mr. Kavanaugh, page 22, calendar number 221, bill number 5844, amendments are received and adopted. Also on a motion by Mr. Kavanaugh, page 25, calendar number 261, bill number 6975B, amendments are received and adopted. And we have many fine resolutions. We will take them up in one vote. On the resolutions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The resolutions are adopted. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I now move that the Assembly stand adjourned until Wednesday, April 6th, tomorrow being a legislative day, and that we reconvene April 11th, Monday, 2 p.m. That is a session day.
The Assembly stands adjourned.